Time now for the Kickstarter discussion as we look into emerging issues from the education system, future direction that technocrats and educationists are seeking to take the country in light of the challenges, some outstanding, some emerging as we have gone on. There are those of you out there, including some observers, who continue to question why the system is what it is. The notion is that across the globe, education systems are increasingly being aligned to the needs and the challenges of the time. Why then should a system that has been seated with us for more than 50 years be the one that we grapple with? There are ongoing efforts from the National Curriculum Development Center and other stakeholders within the education industry to ensure that the realignment is done in order to produce the best possible citizens after school. Citizens that are able to solve community problems and not just seek jobs. Today, we're going to seek to understand why this particular prong is being undertaken by the government and exactly how it's shaping our system as we endeavor to create the very best possible education for our children. In studio, I'm joined by Professor Muhammad Mpeza Mihigo. Professor Mpeza Mihigo is the Vice Chancellor at the Equator University of Science and Technology, and he is, if my words right now are anything to go by, a veteran educationist. Many thanks for joining us, Professor.
Thank you so much, and for that compliment.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. We really appreciate you being an early bird all the time.
Oh, interesting there.
That would have also helped us if our education system also became an early bird in all changing situations.
Interesting there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Many thanks for making it too. It's always a pleasure to have you on board. I'll be also talking to Mr. Dennis Mujimba. Dennis Mujimba is the spokesperson at the Ministry of Education. We're expecting him a little bit later, but let's begin the conversation and do a deep dive into the education system with Professor Mpeza Mihigo. There is a lot that is going on, no doubt, from all prongs and interventions by virtually all stakeholders within the government, the public and the private sector. And it's understandable because the frustration has been long-standing on why we are still unable to do certain things, including basic technological transformations that ought to be an everyday thing on account of acquisition of knowledge that we have acquired. So as we sit here in trying to map a new way forward, we must understand where the problem is and the challenges that we are dealing with. What are they?
Right. Thank you so much for hosting me. As usual, it's a delight to be on NTV. And we need to appreciate that as a country, we are not static in population. We are not static in development in so many aspects. And education is one of the pillars of development.
That's right.
Researchers have showed that countries that actually invest a lot in education, all forms of education, and particularly good foundation education and also very good higher education, advance so fast in their development. They also improve the livelihoods of their populations. So looking at the current education system, which is now being overhauled in terms of level by level, you know, lower secondary, now A level being aligned. There are some other earlier reforms in the primary, but they are not as major, and I think maybe we should be expecting some fundamental changes in the primary level and also early childhood education. This type of education
that is nursery,
they call it
pre-primary,
or ECD, or they call it all sorts of names. So if you look at our independence years, you know, we picked this education system, the formal education system from the British.
From the British, yeah.
Yes, and I think it served its purposes. However, with the event of technology and disruptive knowledge that has come on board, other countries have actually fast-tracked and are moving away from what used to be to what should be, and we are even not very sure what the future looks like. What you think is relevant now actually expires.
Could actually be completely turned on its head.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why we shouldn't have a very tight system. We should have lots of exit routes within any system that we propose, be it at a lower level and at the university. So we are carrying this old system through which most of us have actually gone, and I think it produced some of the best brains, although they were tailored to serve the colonial masters. And when we got independence, we should have started the revolution in education at that point, realizing what we have, what resources we have, human resources, projection in terms of population growth, and then what we would do with our population in terms of job creation and also development. So this is the basic preamble about our education system. And don't forget, this education system, and most people don't realize that, is still driven with that colonial background, because you and I are now speaking in English.
No doubt. I would have loved to do the broadcast in Talejan.
Yeah, it would have been interesting, then we would have popularized all our local languages.
That is right.
And I know that for the primary education level and the pre-primary, they want to really emphasize the use of mother tongue, because you should understand something first in your own mother tongue, before you translate it to others.
That's a whole lot of challenges, especially when it comes to the impartation of institutional knowledge.
Yes.
The foundational knowledge that you begin with, to understand everything around you, including how the environment and the ecosystem work, in order to condition you, the human being, in your mother tongue, is perfectly understandable. But our mother tongues have their own limitations, especially when it comes to what knowledge we have to offer. Up to now, I cannot determine how to call the aorta in Talejan. I cannot determine how to call a particular vein in my language. That means our own languages must also be widened, and that is a whole lot of process to allow for us to understand. Don't talk to me, for example, about the heart in English and then instruct me in my mother tongue. I want to understand the tributaries, I want to understand the veins, how they work and how the blood is pumped, and that is a challenge.
Exactly, that's the point, that our education system should, like now let's take just the issue of the language. If you want to understand the science in Talejan, the biology you are talking about.
That is right.
You could still have the science basics in the lower level of education, and now the Department of Languages at whichever institution, we should have had already by now professors in Talejan who would be able to actually integrate that knowledge and make it available to the community. We would have libraries, community libraries, we would have dictionaries and so on. I know there are some efforts.
There are efforts.
But I think the critical thing is, why do people go to school? That's the fundamental question. Why do parents and other people, guardians, actually spend lots of money? They sell their pieces of land.
That is right.
They take loans.
They lose their own lives.
Exactly. In order. They sacrifice. You know, you find parents who have not bought themselves new clothes
in a long
while. But they know after 4 months there's some amount that needs to be paid for the university semester, the secondary school term, and so on. So what is that pushes people? In the beginning, it was assumed that when you go to school, an investment goes into you. You have added value. You become more useful to yourself. But then, when you get employed, that value is translated into an income, and then you are able to support yourself, support others, and those others will support others. So that's the cycle. However, our population growth has not matched with the value of education, over time.
And neither has the income levels moved along to be able to sustain us.
Yes, exactly. And when we were presented with opportunities with digital disruptions, you know, AI, IT, and so on, our adoption rates are much slower than should be.
That's right.
Because if they do, then we reduce that long route, the pathway, to increase our well-being, to increase our incomes by adoption through technology. Okay, there are theories about if you introduce technology, fewer people will be employed, but the outcome,
the output would
actually benefit the larger part of the population,
and would create greater opportunities that would allow for blending in of everything that has been lost. But allow me backtrack a little and take us back to the narrative that the education received is one that is tailored by the colonial master. We understand, or maybe I don't, has the British system of education largely been different from the one that was occasioned upon the colonies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the beginning that was. But, you know, they are very futuristic. They are very strategic. And, you know, because they came with intentions, okay, to access resources, to have rule, and so on and so forth, they set up certain systems for us as colonies. But then, when you look at how the education system has evolved, they have moved. In fact, if you bring a kid from UK who has done what you can call a primary level, the equivalent, when they get here, they will not fit in the system because it is student-driven most of the time.
That's right.
A nursery kid would be able to design things you cannot even imagine. They are able to express themselves, they can think, they are questioning, whereas in our system it was like I stand before the kids, whatever I say is like divine. You know, it's not questionable.
Religious truth.
And we know some teachers in some schools, even universities, who penalize students who seem to be, they used to call it wiseacring, you know, like becoming more wise.
If you ask too many questions, you're a wiseacre.
So yes, you are. So we used to call it wiseacring. So if you analyze what has happened on their part, they have since moved. Actually, they have broken the structures. They have introduced, even at university level. You know, for example, at university level, for so long. In the UK, if you did an undergraduate program, it would take, let's say, 4 years. But you would qualify to join a Doctor of Philosophy, a PhD program.
That's right.
In our situation, it's like, I mean, it's like illegal. And why? Because you're adding another 2 years. But if a student attains certain grades, and you put that as your criteria, that after 4 years and you attain a first class in your undergraduate, what we need is maybe get one year there to bridge, you know, between the undergraduate and research training at postgraduate, and then you undertake your PhD program 3 years and you are done.
You're very
Here
qualified.
you must go through the cycle and then this and that. And yet it delays the whole system.
It delays, but over time, I've seen the tendency for the average Ugandan to brag about that, the fact that they've taken so long acquiring certain knowledge that you must sit and respect that reality. Professor, let's go for a break. When we return, this conversation will continue, and hopefully we'll be joined by the other panelists. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm glad you're still with us. It's 8:03 and the Kickstarter is where we are at. We're looking into emerging issues and the developments that are being undertaken in our education system, the search for new directions as we realign and reconstruct what we believe is a failing system, a system that does not provide the kind of citizens that we desire to be, a system that has led to what appears to be a conspiracy to leave the African behind. That is exactly what it is. Many times you won't hear the reality. No one is going to tell you the truth. They are going to massage the words, but the system is designed to leave us behind. I was watching a documentary of Chinese boys and girls as young as 8, and they were being given tasks to come up with what they think would be the best car for themselves. Imagine an 8-year-old trying to design their own car. And believe me, the boys were coming up with designs that were, well, outrageous, but they showed the ability to reconstruct their environment. Somebody even thought, one of the kids thought, that a car should not have so many people. After all, it's mine. So I only want my seat and the steering. And he designed something like that. How many times are you going to find that kind of creative process in a nursery school or a primary school in Uganda? Those are questions for you to ponder on. But in studio, I have with me Professor Muhammad Mpeza Mihigo. He is the Vice Chancellor at the Equator University of Science and Technology. We are now also joined by Dr. Dennis Mujimba, the spokesperson at the Ministry of Education. Doctor, a very warm welcome to Morning at NTV.
Thank you. Good morning.
Great. There's a day I was told, you man, you're hitting too hard. But if we won't hit this nail on the head, no one will. Our education system is in shambles. We appreciate, as a nation, every single effort that is being undertaken to realign, to reconstruct, in order for us to be where we want to be. But Professor, in his preamble, has been taking us through where all this comes and where the problems have arisen. The fact that the colonial system that was occasioned upon us is the one that we still glorify, and that we haven't been able as a population to think for ourselves and do the things that are fit for purpose in our own reality. Before you speak as the spokesperson of the Ministry of Education, you're a product of our education system.
Yes, I am.
And you're a successful one, for that matter.
Yes, I am.
By any standards. But things need to change. What should we tweak?
Thank you. And thank you, viewers, for having us and giving us your attention. When you think about a complex issue or a big issue, you can be overwhelmed by the magnitude of it.
Yeah.
But you have to touch points that give you the maximum return on investment. In our education system, there are many things we can touch on. You can touch on infrastructure, you can touch on teacher capabilities, you can touch on the learning methods, etc. But the little flywheel that will change the momentum of this huge mass that you want to influence is actually curriculum.
That is right.
Because within that curriculum, it is the most formal and strategic way that you can determine what you want to teach, how you will teach it, and who will teach it.
That's right.
So in this last, the reforms you're now hearing of the revised O-level curriculum, which was introduced in 2020, actually the efforts began a lot earlier, but it's only that we launched it out in 2020. The efforts that were put in was, first of all, to think, what do we want the learner to be like? We wanted that learner that is curious.
That is right.
That learner that is relevant to their community, to their home, to their society, to their school. The learner that can push the boundaries of questioning what they are learning.
That's right.
Now, that was the design intent. What will you be able to do? Because it's not just a matter of acquiring the knowledge, but what can you do with this knowledge? And that is what actually came out in the assessment, these pioneer results of 2024 for the first cohort of the Senior 4 revised curriculum. We were not just testing what you know, but what did you do with what you knew? So we believe that we're on the right track. But it is a very slow effort, because you're not going to see the result right now. You're not even going to see it through the projects the learners are making in right. Senior 1 to Senior 4. You want to look at the impact 4 to 5 years, 3 to 5 years after this learner has gone either through higher education, tertiary or university. How different is this learner from you and I, who never went through that kind of curriculum? It is very, very transformative. It's a very transformative way of learning, because we are not just looking at the competences of knowledge, but we are also looking at skills. we are looking at the attitudes, we are looking at the value system that you're able to form as an individual, and of course individuals form a society. Now, the issue of attitude is so strong. However much competent someone is, but if they do not have the right attitude, I can tell you there'll be a disastrous entrepreneur or a disastrous employee.
That is right.
And when you look at the testimonies we hear from these students in classroom, from the parents themselves, these are children already that are beginning to push the boundaries. They are questioning. We used to have learners who are in school just to get notes from this teacher. But now they are able to question. They are able to do minimal research by themselves. They are able to go and find out information that is even beyond what is in the curriculum topic. Now, that is the level of curiosity we want. Now, when the admissions for senior fives were going on, a very interesting trend has come up. There is now a greater desire for learners to do science combinations.
Okay.
That is a trend which is very surprising.
Conditioned by the...
Exactly, the curiosity in the revised O-level curriculum. And there's enough evidence, empirical evidence through research, that learners will get interested in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics area of learning when they are exposed to critical thinking at an earlier stage, project-based learning, problem solving. Now, that is something that we are seeing with the lower secondary curriculum. So we are trying to fix a problem that, as my fellow panelist has rightly said, it is historical. But we have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere.
And we are not pessimists. We are optimists, and we are very hopeful that we're on the right track.
That's right.
But there's a cog that needs to be changed in its attitude, and that is the teacher. The teacher, the facilitator. Exactly. And you've used the right word. We are no longer talking of just you teaching. You are a facilitator of learning. Meaning that you're not the only source of knowledge. The learner is also a participant. That's why we are talking of learner-centered learning. It's no longer you, the teacher, as the center of focus. But now, until this facilitator called Dennis changes his attitude, you put down your degree that you got at university or diploma, that I am supposed to be the facilitator, not just the source of knowledge and learning. That is what we are talking about, the attitude. And in any change process, 85% of change resistance is psychological. So until the teachers adjust their attitudes, we had incidences of schools that went even up to 2023 still using the old curriculum.
Interesting. Dr. Mujimba, I'll be returning to you shortly, especially on that aspect you've touched, the fact that some teachers continue to use the old curriculum despite the rollout of the new one. I'm asking who is responsible for the administering of that curriculum, the rollout. How can a teacher or a head teacher supervise teachers undertaking an old curriculum when there is a new one? Looking at gaps when it comes to enforcement, especially by the Ministry of Education. You'll also be taking us through why facilitators were trained late or are still being trained on this particular curriculum. You have a set of learners and facilitators, both requiring to learn the new thing. It completely chokes any effort to educate the learner that you might want to achieve. But Professor, let me take you back to the aspect of why now. This is a whole 50 years plus that we are all of a sudden waking up. We've been jerked into reality. And I'm wondering, who has been sleeping on the job all this while?
Well, I think, as you can see, we are all smiling and laughing. One of the characteristics of the British rule, and it is known, is deep-rooted bureaucracy.
Deep-rooted bureaucracy.
And that bureaucracy is manifested in all that we do. By the way, some countries that have become a bit, I don't want to use radical, but have gone away from the system, are seen as outlier countries, or even when you have leaders who come on board. You had, for example, in our situation here in Uganda, we had in the ministry some commissions in UNEB and other, where there were, like some efforts to try and fast track things. But now, you have the people from the ministry have got to go through a certain set of processes.
That's right.
It requires funding and this and that. So that kind of sluggishness creates real delays. And then we are left by either the bus or the train. So I think that kind of characteristic of the bureaucracy of the British is really, it is deep rooted in us who have gone through the system. So this is one of the things. But what my colleague has just talked about, how fast should we move, in order for us to cope with the changes, the transformation we are looking at. I think my proposal is we need to look at the entire system. And this system, we should have parallel pilots. For example, he's talked about teachers. What is happening in the teacher training colleges? That's one aspect.
That's one aspect.
So the people who are joining those colleges, should really be up to speed with the conventional requirements. The ones who are still in the system, we should have parallel arrangements
to onboard them.
To onboard them, and we have clear targets and even set milestones. But not only milestones, we can even introduce reward systems. The Ministry of Education, for example, can set praises and awards and presents to schools and teachers who are actually coping. It's not just about implementing.
It's not about implementing.
We have to create incentives. Then look at the university system. In the university, it's like doctors consulting. Doctors sit on this side of the table, and it's the patient who is expected to
face
come.
them.
Instead of the doctor, conventionally, getting to know the dynamics of the community and knowing what's the most prevalent problem, and then organizing community linkages and refer patients to his clinic or her clinic.
That's right.
So now what is going to happen is that with time, we need to connect, we need to connect as a system and say in the university system, you are still waiting to receive students based on your selections. Although the A-level, the harmonized A-level curriculum, has some changes, we need to know those changes and then map with our existing curricula and be able to do some amendments and go again through our regulator so that we know in 2 years' time, I think it will be 2 years for this batch, we are ready. Because the student who is coming, who is doing biology, and chemistry in order to pursue medicine, this student who has gone through the new lower secondary curriculum and the new A-level curriculum is definitely going to be different from this guy or lady who actually memorized and recalled all these answers and got A's. So this is the thing. And then in terms of the infrastructure as well, you see, there's now private providers. We also have public providers of education. The delay we see in really waking up, if you check, decisions are very fast in the private sector. The red tape is shorter.
In fact, they make decisions at the speed of business.
Because they have another motivation.
The speed of business.
It's like each time you delay, you lose money.
You're losing money.
You lose money. But you see, government is the biggest employer. And I think probably teachers contribute one of the largest employees of government. And so look at that budget. And therefore, why not spend more money and retool these teachers in good time? We set targets while we are moving the curriculum. So for me, I think we need some radical interventions where government comes and says, here we go. We are taking this money, we are taking a loan. Ministry of Education, this is the money for you. We need in the next, like they put a deadline that if you are not a graduate in 10 years' time, you're out of business.
You're out of business.
You get it? So we need some kind of stand that will push everybody in the sector, new regulations, new targets, and new minimum standards.
I'm glad we have with us the spokesperson from the Ministry of Education here, who has it on his fingertips on how that is being rolled out. The speed, the intensity, and the spirit of enforcement is important, because many Ugandans usually we go into the what I call a near quagmire. the quicksand of gradualism. Something has been rolled out, then because the funds haven't come, you conveniently tell the government, you didn't give us money, so we couldn't do that.
Yeah, I think we live in harsh realities. As I was driving in, held back by the traffic, I tuned into the BBC.
Okay.
And I was hearing, you know, someone give an analysis of the trends, the projections of global economic growth.
Yeah.
And they were saying that we have not yet come out of the woods from the COVID recovery. Yes. Yeah. And that most of the central banks have not even reined in the inflation, because a lot of money was pumped into the society to jumpstart the economy.
That is right.
Now that money has to be mopped out. Coming back to education, when we rolled out the new A-level curriculum in 2020 first term, O-level,
yeah.
we did not anticipate that COVID was going to hit us in March. Remember, we rolled out in January, and then in March, we closed schools.
Oh my God.
We had already started training, but we closed for almost 2.5 years.
Sure.
So in those 2.5 years, because of the other limitations within our society, we could have done virtual training.
That is right.
But you can't do virtual trainings when not everyone has a tablet.
It will only
or a
benefit
phone.
a few.
A few. And you'll end up causing a disparity.
That is right.
So we have suffered that effect, and it's still on. So even when we fully reopened, remember, the learner is not waiting in terms of age.
Yeah.
Learning has to continue.
It has to continue.
It's like repairing a plane in mid-air. You don't have time to land. You continue.
That's right.
That is what we've been doing.
No,
and
but we need to give credit to the ministry, especially when you introduced the issue of automatic promotion.
yes.
Of course, there were consequences.
There were consequences, yes.
But then the ministry demonstrated
Yes.
that, you know, whatever comes, we
Yes.
have to create
We have
a
to
situation
create
a
to address that.
Thank you so much. And I think that is the kind of resolve we need, that if we are convinced this is the direction to go, kama mbaya, we have to arrive.
Yes.
We have to go.
Yeah.
So we are still doing mop-up trainings, and Professor here hinted on a challenge which and the First Lady really talked about it extensively in the release of A-level results, that the higher education subsector needs to keep up with speed of what is happening in basic and secondary education curriculum reforms. You do not need the ministry to first write a circular to you as a university to tell you that we are changing the curriculum and teaching methods. You don't need that. And that is why you're a higher education institution of learning. You study the winds, the weather, and know how to adjust the sail and how to go. But it is a surprise that there are few universities, for these last 4 years we've been with the revised lower secondary curriculum, that actually jumped on board to revise even the curriculum they have for teacher education and training. So we all have to be reading the same dashboard. We have to look in the same direction and know these learners that are coming through the system have been exposed to a new way of learning, a new way of exploring, a new way of problem solving. If you remain stuck with the old system, you're going to face a challenge with these learners when they reach university or higher education. Other than TVET, which is hands-on, the higher education subsector and other tertiary institutions need to get into hands-on learning. Otherwise, you're having a breed of learners that are very different, and you yourself as a lecturer, you'll get frustrated when these learners begin questioning. Because remember, for 6 years, that is what they've been used to.
I am just trying to think about the process in a lecture theatre, and you're questioning Professor Mpeza Mihigo in our time. Oh my God.
You'd be in trouble. You'll actually get a SAP. We had lecturers who tell us that
of course,
no one...
Professor Mpeza Mihigo is just, you know, I'm not particularly saying.
In our times, there are some lecturers who tell you that in my papers, no one gets an A. So imagine right from the start,
right from, even before you begin
yes,
to,
you're being told that you will not pass.
You can't get on.
You know, what is that? So there is a lot that needs to change.
Okay.
We need to be systematic. Let us train those who are already in service.
Yes.
We retool them. Good enough you're not taking them to the basics of teaching. No, it is a pure reorientation and onboarding them.
Okay.
But for the new entrants into the profession, we need to start from the higher education and tertiary institutions. That is where the curriculum changes at their level needs to happen. And you cannot ask professor to teach me competence-based and learner-centered curriculum when he himself is not comfortable with it. So the higher education institutions need also to retool their academic staff at that level. And it's not only those who are going into teaching, because everyone, the economists, social workers, etc., because all this crop or cohort of learners, they have been used to a competence-based, learner-centered curriculum.
Thank you very much. We are entering the bottom of the hour, that is 8:30. I would have loved, Professor, to just submit on an aspect of the complex nature that requires for the creation of exit points. You talked about, if my understanding of your point is anything to go by, you said we should be so flexible to the extent that there are a lot more exit points, so that the challenges that we face, that we have no idea how they will come and when they will come. They could come as early as tomorrow. AI has showed us that, well, you could plan for 2 years, but the challenge is upon you in the next 1 hour, next week, or the next month. So the creation of those exit points to allow for flexibility in learning must be something that should be considered by the educationists and the technocrats within the system. Within a minute or two, quickly tell, I think you can ask that question directly to Dr. Mujimba, and then we can go for the break and then return.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, if we want to keep going and remaining, you know, there's this terminology of remaining relevant, appropriate.
It keeps being thrown around.
Yes, exactly. So being relevant means that if there is a trend in the education systems globally, they impact on the trends in our, because, you know, we are not producing only for our own consumption.
That is right.
In fact, at the moment, it's like we can actually declare that the job market is fully saturated, almost in some disciplines. And so sometimes people hide under the pretext, you know, because we do not have enough, you know, our job absorption capacity is not matching with our production rate.
That is right.
And of course, I'm not undermining the concerns about gaps in the training and skilling of our graduates. But we need to appreciate that whatever is relevant, and then because this flexibility is now created from O level and then the aligned A level, the flexibility should also come in university system. At the moment, as he rightly said, people still have like block walls around their minds. It's like if you go outside this scope, you know, like why shouldn't we now, for example, become so revolutionary to introduce smart gadgets, you know, more of the open book situations, give the student all the material, but ask them a critical thinking question rather than regurgitating your notes. Why should somebody keep producing your notes?
Okay, we're going to have to amend our broadcasting schedule, especially for this particular program, and wrap this up so that we allow for more programming to get underway. Dr. Mujimba, as a spokesperson for the ministry, I am hard-pressed, but 30 seconds, wrap it up, and we close.
We thank you, NTV, and on behalf of government for supporting us as the media industry in publicizing government reforms. the more people get to know about the changes and why these changes are being made, then buy-in becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
We thank you.
All right. Dr. Dennis Mujimba, spokesperson of the Ministry of Education, many thanks for making time, and many thanks to you too. Professor Mohammed Mpeza Mihigo, Vice Chancellor at the Equator University of Science and Technology. It's been a pleasure having your perspectives that have no doubt emboldened our understanding of where we are heading in as far as the education system is concerned. Stay with us. After the break, we shall be delving into Islamic banking and how that is rolling out, especially with the financial institutions and you that might want a little bit of money that has no interest on it.